Hey, this is Bill Romer from PianoFast, and in this hopefully relatively short video, I want to talk to you about how to create that jazz piano sound. In my course, Jazz Piano Fast, I go through a number of step-by-step techniques that you can apply to melodies and lead sheets, so melodies with chords, that you can create a jazz piano arrangement. But in this video, I want to go over just some of the basics to get you started, okay? So this is kind of a bonus lesson for that course, I guess you would say. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about chords. And to do this, I want to use a famous set of chords that you're probably really familiar with. You may have played it as a kid. You may play it now still. To musicians, it's called a 1-6-2-5 progression. And in the key of C, so all white keys, what we're dealing with here, the reason it's called a 1-6-2-5 is if you count the notes of the C major scale starting with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, you're back to C, then the chords in this progression are built from the 1, C major, the 6, A minor, the 2 is D minor, and the 5, it was G major, usually played G7. Okay, so you've probably recognized the progression now. It's this heart and soul progression, right? But also used in a lot of other songs. I got rhythm. They refer to those as rhythm changes also among musicians. So that's the set of chords, the chord progression we're going to talk about. And let's just play it in that simple progression the way it is. I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do to make these chords sound better and to make them sound more in the direction of jazz piano. Okay? So first of all, a lot of people play them in root position. So they'll start playing these chords, let's say just with the right hand, like this. C major, A minor, D minor, and G major, or G7. So, the very first thing you can do is to improve what's called the voice leading of this chord progression, meaning you don't want the chords to jump around very much. You want those inside voices to move as little as possible, so that way it won't sound as disjoint to your listener. Now, in the extreme case, you might get something like this: C major, A minor, D minor, G7. Right? It's just all over the place. But when you play it down here, C major, A minor, D minor, G7, doesn't sound bad, but it could sound better like this. Well, first I better talk about chord inversions, okay? So a chord inversion is a chord that's not in root position with the root of the chord at the bottom, but the root is somewhere else. And so to make an inversion, starting from C major, for example, we take this root, the C, and put it on top. So that's the first inversion of C major. Now, if we take this E from the bottom and put it on top, that's second inversion of C major. Now if we put this G on top, we end up in root position again. So with 3 notes in the chord, a triad, a major triad, we only have 2 inversions, first and second. Now if there are more notes in the chord, like say G7, this is root position of a G7 chord, then if you take this G and move it to the top, this is first inversion. Now if you take this B and move it to the top, that's second inversion. Now if you take the D and move it to the top, that's third inversion. Now if you take this F and move it to the top, now we're back to root position again. So a chord with 4 notes in it has 3 inversions. 1 less, because root position takes up 1 of those with the root. Okay? So if we use inversions, we can make the chord progression sound nicer by not moving as much when we play. So, to go from C major to A minor, instead of jumping down here, we might as well just move 1 note to there. Now we have an A minor in first inversion. Now to make the D minor, which is next, we could, well actually, if we play it in root position, we just move these two notes here, and we get D minor in root position. Now, if we were to jump somewhere and play G7 in root position, we could either jump up here or down here. But remember, we're here right now. So the easiest thing to do is just to add these two notes here, the G and the B. Actually, move this A to the B, rather, and add this G. See, it's right there, nice and close. So that whole progression then becomes... See how much nicer that sounds? It's nice and smooth. You could even do it a little lower on the keyboard. Let's say we started in second inversion of a C major, right there. Now to play A minor, we go maybe to root position here. And then D minor, we could just go here, second inversion. And G7, we could go right here, root position. So... So that keeps your fingers and the voices of those chords all within a tiny area. So that's called good voice leading. So that's the first thing you can do. That's not necessarily a jazz piano thing. That's just a piano and an instrumental thing in general. Now, to make these chords sound jazzier, one of the first things that usually jazz musicians do is modify the chords by adding sevenths, okay? Now, they'll add a lot more alterations, and I talk about these in my Jazz PianoFast course, but one of the easiest ones you can do, there are two of them. The first one is to take major chords and make them into major seventh chords. So to do that, you take a major triad, in this case C major, and we add the note that's a half step below the root. In this case, that would be a B, natural. So that now becomes a four-note chord. And let's go back for a second and just play the root of this chord in the left hand just to give it some depth. Forget the sevenths for a second. Let's just go back through that progression. All right, all I'm doing is playing the root of the chord with the left hand at the same time. Or if we started down here, that, okay? I just wanted to mention that before I just start doing it in the video here. So back to our sevenths. Let's turn the C major into a C major 7. All right. Now, that may sound a little weird to you. So let's try an inversion of this. Let's do it down here. And it takes a slightly different quality to it all of a sudden, since that C doesn't stand out so much. Now, since we're playing the root in the left hand, the C, we could get rid of it here. Let's see what that sounds like. Slightly softer quality, so we don't have as much dissonance with that C in there. If we get rid of it, it sort of softens that chord. It takes the traditional, I don't know if edge is the right word off it, but it's not quite as campy as just playing the plain old C major. You get a softer chord. That's what major sevenths do. It's still a major chord, now it's major seventh. All right? So let's stick with that for the C major. For the minor chords, we're going to make them minor seventh chords. And the way we do that is we add the note that's a whole step below the root of that chord. So for an A minor, we would add a G major, whole step below. All right? So we'll add that on. And for D minor, we would add a C major. That's a whole step below the root. So from now I'm going to keep playing the C major 7th. But now I'll play an A minor 7th. And a D minor 7th. And we'll stick with the G7. Hear how much nicer that sounds now, all of a sudden? And now we're kind of moving in the direction of jazz piano. Although regular old minor 7th chords and 7th chords are used a lot in popular music too, not just jazz. The major 7th is a little more of a jazzy sound, although that comes through in pop music as well. But this is the beginning of altering chords to move in the direction of jazz piano, okay? So now, instead of, you could play the 4 notes. Now that, we're going back to root position of the chords, but what if we did our inversions? Get something a little more interesting, but I like just the sound of the chords. Okay, and if this song only contained those chords, which basically it does if it's heart and soul that you're playing, then you only need to focus on those chords to practice if that's the song that you're working on. You don't have to worry about the entire universe of chords, okay? And a great way to do that is to practice the inversions of the chords. So just go up and down the keyboard. Let's say for a C major 7, let's start way down here. It may not sound great, but this is just for practice sake. And we just move up and down all the inversions. And back down again. Reminding yourself as you go that this is a C major 7, then A minor 7th. Whoops, there we go. All right, so that's a great way to practice the chords for any song, are those inversions. Plus, if you add an alteration to them, like we did here, we add 7ths, then you can apply that to the song and make it sound a little more in the direction of jazz piano. Plus, you can then use the tones of those chords to improvise. Like that. It's a great start to improvising. All right? Okay, before I get carried away here, I better wrap up this video. But that's a few steps I wanted to teach you, kind of this little beginner bonus lesson for my Jazz Piano Fast course, which you can check out somewhere on the links on this page right now. And be sure and practice your chords, use the inversions. You can begin to improvise using those scale tones. And have fun. Take your favorite lead sheet or heart and soul like this and add a few chord alterations and make it your own. That's what jazz piano is all about. So I hope you enjoyed this jazz piano bonus lesson, and be sure and check out my Jazz Piano Fast course, and I will see you next time.